The email arrived at 2:17 a.m., and Daniel Mercer knew before he opened it that something was wrong. He had been sleeping lightly for weeks, his mind never fully at rest. The company had been tense, meetings shorter, smiles tighter. When his phone lit up on the nightstand, the glow cut through the darkness like a warning. He reached for it, heart already beating faster. The subject line read, "Board decision. No greeting. No context." He sat up in bed and opened it. The words were clean and formal. After careful review, the board had voted to restructure executive leadership. Effective immediately, Daniel Mercer was relieved of his duties as Chief Operations Officer. His system access would be terminated by morning. His shares were under evaluation. The decision had been unanimous. Daniel, read the sentence 3 times. The room felt colder. He swung his legs off the bed and stared at the floor, trying to slow his breathing. 12 years. 12 years of building, negotiating, sacrificing sleep, missing holidays, betting everything. Gone in a paragraph. Unanimous meant Ethan had voted too. Ethan Cole was not just a co-founder. He was history. They had met at university. 2 ambitious students with more ideas than money. They had shared cheap apartments, split bills, dreamed about changing industries. When Daniel's father passed away during their final year, Ethan had slept on his couch for a week just so he wouldn't be alone. When Ethan's first product pitch failed and investors laughed them out of a room, Daniel had stood beside him and said, "We try again tomorrow. Together. Always together." Daniel walked into his living room and turned on a single lamp. The silence pressed in. He opened the email again, searching for some hidden line that softened the blow. There was none. It was signed by the board chair. Ethan's name wasn't there, but it didn't need to be unanimous. He checked his company account. Logged out. Tried again. Denied. It was already happening. By sunrise. The industry blogs had the story. Visionary leadership change. Company prepares for aggressive expansion. Ethan's face appeared beside headlines, confident and composed. Daniel watched one short interview clip online. Ethan stood in front of the company logo, speaking calmly. "Sometimes hard decisions are necessary for growth," he said. "We're entering a new phase." Daniel closed the laptop. Hard decisions. The phrase echoed in his head like an excuse rehearsed in front of a mirror. He thought back to the last board meeting he attended. Investors had pushed for rapid expansion into overseas markets. Daniel had argued for caution. Supply chains were not stable. Their main product still needed refinement. Scaling too fast could damage their reputation. Ethan had been quiet during that meeting. Too quiet. Afterward, Daniel had asked him directly, "You agree with me, right?" Ethan had hesitated. Just a second. Then he nodded. "We'll handle it." Daniel had trusted that. Now he understood the silence. He poured himself a glass of water but didn't drink it. His mind moved quickly, connecting pieces. The private investor dinners he hadn't been invited to. The sudden urgency around. Timelines. The board requesting separate reports from Ethan. He had seen the signs. He just hadn't believed them. At 8 a.m., his phone began buzzing. Messages from colleagues. Some short and awkward. "I'm so sorry. This is shocking. Can we talk?" One message stood out. From Ethan, "We need to talk. Please." Daniel stared at it for a long time. His thumb hovered over the screen. He imagined Ethan's voice steady, persuasive, reasonable. He imagined explanations about market pressure and fiduciary duty. He locked the phone without replying. An hour later, He drove to the office anyway. He didn't know why. Maybe to prove to himself it was real. Maybe to see if someone would stop him at the door. The building looked the same. Glass and steel reflecting the morning light. Employees streamed in, coffee cups in hand, unaware that the ground beneath leadership had shifted overnight. When Daniel approached the entrance, security stepped forward. Not aggressively, just firmly. "I'm sorry, sir. We've been instructed." "It's fine," Daniel said quietly. The guard looked embarrassed. Daniel had hired him 2 years ago during an expansion. He had shaken his hand and welcomed him to the team. Now he was an outsider. Daniel stepped back onto the sidewalk. Cars passed. Life continued. He felt exposed standing there, like someone had stripped his identity in public. For years, he had introduced himself as co-founder Ku'u. His work had structured his days, his thoughts, his sense of worth. Without it, he felt UNANCH. His phone rang again. Ethan. Daniel declined the call. Anger began to surface. Slow and steady. Not explosive. Focused. He replayed conversations in his head. The late nights when they mapped strategy on whiteboards. The promises they made to protect their culture. The time an investor suggested cutting staff to boost short-term profit. And Daniel had said, "We don't sacrifice people for optics." Ethan had agreed back then. What changed? Or maybe the better question was, when did Ethan start seeing him as an obstacle? Daniel drove aimlessly through the city. Every street corner carried memories of meetings, pitches, milestones. The first client contract signed in a cafe. The small warehouse they once celebrated securing. The apartment where they assembled prototypes by hand. By afternoon, the official press release hit mainstream business news. Ethan was quoted again. Confident, strategic, forward-looking. There was no mention of Daniel's contributions. No acknowledgement of partnership. Just a clean narrative. Leadership evolves. Daniel felt something inside him tighten. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. He returned home and opened a folder on his personal computer labeled Foundation. It contained early drafts of their business plan, emails from years ago, photos of them smiling in that cramped garage office. He clicked through them slowly. In one photo, Ethan had written on the whiteboard in bold letters, "Trust is our edge." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. Trust. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Maybe Ethan believed he was saving the company. Maybe investors had pressured him. Maybe he told himself Daniel's caution was holding them back. But if that were true, why not talk openly? Why not argue face to face? Why the secret vote at 2 a.m.? Because confrontation would have made it real. And Ethan had chosen efficiency over honesty. The thought settled heavily in Daniel's chest. By evening, the initial shock had faded, replaced by clarity. He began listing facts. The company was entering risky territory. The expansion timeline was aggressive. Key partnerships were not finalized. He knew every vulnerability because he had helped build the system. Knowledge was power. For the first time that day, he felt something other than pain. Control. If Ethan wanted to rewrite history, Daniel could rewrite the future. The idea formed. Quietly, he still had relationships with vendors. Suppliers trusted him. Engineers respected him. Investors had once called him the steady hand. He could expose weaknesses, not lies. Truths. Truth delivered at the right moment could shift confidence overnight. The thought did not frighten him. It steadied him. He imagined the next board meeting unraveling. He imagined Ethan forced to answer hard questions. He imagined headlines questioning leadership. A balance restored. Daniel stood and walked to the window. The city lights flickered on, one by one. Somewhere in a high-rise office, Ethan was probably celebrating, shaking hands, planning interviews. Did he feel guilt? Or had he convinced himself it was necessary? Daniel pressed his hand against the glass. He remembered the day they signed their first major contract. They had stood outside this very window, younger, hopeful. Ethan had said, "No matter how big this gets, we stay honest with each other." Daniel had believed that more than any business plan. The betrayal cut deeper because it came wrapped. In history. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. "I never wanted it to happen like this." Daniel finally typed back. "But you wanted it to happen." Three dots appeared instantly. Then disappeared. No reply came. Daniel set the phone down. In that silence, something shifted inside him. The sadness hardened into resolve. He would not beg for explanation. He would not fade quietly into a footnote. If Ethan had chosen ambition over loyalty, Daniel would choose strength over despair. The night stretched on, but Daniel did not return to bed. He opened a new document and began writing notes, names, timelines, leverage points. Not out of chaos. Out of calculation. Every company has pressure points. Every leader has blind spots. And Daniel knew them all. By the time dawn approached again, the hurt was still there, but it had transformed. It was no longer a wound. It was fuel. He closed his laptop and stood in the early grey light. 12 years ago, he had started with nothing but an idea and trust in a friend. Now he stood, alone. Betrayed. Removed. But not powerless. As the sun rose over the city skyline, Daniel made a quiet promise to himself. He would not let this be the end of his story. And whether Ethan realized it yet or not, the decision made at 2:17 a.m. had started something far from over. Daniel did not sleep the next night. The shock from the betrayal had faded, replaced by something sharper and more focused. He sat at his desk with the lights off, the city glowing outside his window. His laptop screen illuminated his face as he opened document after document, reviewing contracts, timelines, investor reports he had saved over the years. He knew the company like a map carved into his mind. He knew where it was strong. More importantly, he knew where it was fragile. Ethan had chosen speed, rapid expansion, international shipping, new manufacturing partners overseas. Daniel had warned the board that the supply chain was not ready. There were unresolved quality tests. A rushed product launch could damage their reputation for years. The board had called him cautious. Ethan had called it necessary risk. Now, Daniel understood. Risk was easier to defend when someone else paid the price. He created a new folder on his desktop. He did not name it anything dramatic. Just one word. Review. Inside it, he began organizing everything he knew. Vendor contracts with tight deadlines. Emails from engineers expressing concern about unfinished testing. Forecast models that looked confident on slides, but were vulnerable to small delays. None of it was false. None of it was illegal. But in the right hands, at the right time, it could cause doubt. Daniel leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He imagined the launch event 6 weeks away. Investors flying in, media coverage. Ethan standing on stage, promising a bold new future. All it would take was one well-timed leak. One trusted journalist questioning projections. Confidence would crack. The idea steadied him. For days Daniel stayed quiet publicly. He did not post online. He did not speak to reporters who called asking for comment. He let Ethan control the narrative. Meanwhile, he began making calls. The first was to Victor Harley, a supplier they had worked with for 5 years. Victor respected Daniel. They had negotiated difficult terms together during the early growth phase. "Daniel," Victor said, surprised but warm. "I heard the news. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Daniel replied calmly. "How are things on your end?" There was a pause. "Busy. Very busy. The new expansion plan is ambitious." "Are you ready for it?" Daniel asked. Victor hesitated. "We'll manage." Daniel heard the uncertainty in his voice. After the call ended, Daniel made notes. Shipping timelines were tight. Production capacity stretched. Any delay would ripple through the system. Next, he called an old colleague from compliance. Casual conversation at first, then gentle questions. "Are regulatory filings complete for the international rollout?" he asked. "Almost," she said. "We're moving fast." Too fast, Daniel thought. Every conversation confirmed what he already knew. The company was building a tower on unstable ground. But something else began to happen during those calls. People trusted him. They opened up. They shared concerns. They asked if he was starting something new. Daniel felt the pull of two paths forming. In front of him, one path led backward to the company, to Ethan, to correction through exposure. The other path led forward to building something separate, something smaller, something aligned with his values. Revenge demanded attention. Growth required patience. He wasn't sure yet which one he wanted more. A week later, he met Mia at a quiet cafe. She had been one of the strongest project managers on his team. "Smart, steady, loyal. You look different," she said, studying him. "How?" Daniel asked. "Focused," she replied, "but not at peace." He smiled faintly. "That obvious?" She stirred her coffee. "People are nervous inside the company. The expansion is exciting, but rushed. Ethan is pushing hard." "Does he seem confident?" Daniel asked. "He seems determined." Determined. That word again. Daniel felt the familiar tension rise in his chest. What if the expansion isn't ready? He asked. Mia met his eyes. "Then a lot of people will suffer for it." Her words stayed with him long after they parted. That night, Daniel opened his folder again. He drafted an anonymous email to a respected financial journalist. He attached a summary of concerns. Clear, factual. No exaggeration. His finger hovered over the send button. He imagined the impact. Headlines questioning. Leadership. Investors demanding answers. Ethan forced to explain why warnings had been ignored. Justice, he told himself. But another image surfaced: engineers working late nights, proud of what they were building. Junior staff who believed in the mission. If the launch collapsed publicly, they would bear the stress. Their work would be questioned. Their stability threatened. Revenge was never precise. It splashed. Daniel closed the email without sending it. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Investor Q and a live stream in 3 days. Ethan would be presenting the new roadmap. Daniel watched it from his living room. Ethan appeared polished as ever. He spoke about innovation, speed, global presence. He answered questions smoothly. Then, an investor asked about supply chain readiness. For a fraction of a second, Ethan hesitated. Daniel noticed. It was small, almost invisible. But it was there. Ethan said they had strong partnerships and contingency plans. He moved on quickly. Daniel muted the stream. He realized something important in that moment. Ethan knew the risks. He was not blind. He was betting. That momentum would carry them through before problems surfaced. Daniel stood and paced the room. If he exposed the weaknesses now, he would not be correcting ignorance. He would be punishing ambition. Was that enough reason? He opened his laptop and began drafting a different document. Not a leak, a proposal. He outlined a new consulting firm focused on sustainable scaling, ethical growth, risk analysis. He listed potential clients. He listed Mia's name under operations. As he typed, the anger that had driven him began to shift. It did not disappear. It changed direction. He still wanted accountability, but maybe accountability did not require destruction. Later that week, Victor called him back. "Daniel, off the record," Victor said, lowering his voice. "We're being asked to double output within a month. It's possible, but quality checks will be tight." Daniel felt the weight of that information. If quality slipped, customers would notice. "You should protect your standards," Daniel said carefully. "I will," Victor replied. "But pressure is real." After the call, Daniel stared at the wall for a long time. He could use this. A simple nudge to delay shipments. A quiet suggestion to regulators to re-examine certifications. The launch would stumble. He imagined Ethan receiving that news. The frustration. The scramble. Part of him wanted to see it. Another part felt tired. Tired of circling around a moment that had already happened. Tired of replaying betrayal like a film stuck on repeat.